Pasha Paroh Y Net 7. Thank you for tuning. Got Trish back in the building today. So, yeah, say hi, Trish.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's the perfect day. Thanks for
Always
coming
good.
out. So, we was having a conversation, Trish and I, and the statement came up, complaint and venting. And I was like, that's going to be our next topic. So, a little bit of time passed. Trish was really excited. I was really excited about this topic. She had talked to her earlier. She was like, she went and talked to some people, got some insight on the topic, and she's ready to present her side, because what it was she is saying, like many of you will, that there's a difference between complaining and venting. And I'm going to take the side of showing you how they're the same. Trish.
Well, they're from the same place, obviously. They're in the vein of communication and verbalization. But there's the intent behind them is different. That's the key. I'm just going to put a real rough synopsis from speaking with my friend and just kind of, working through this. Venting is when a person wants to talk about a problem with the aim to finding a solution. They don't just want to, they've got this problem they're grappling with, and they're trying to figure out how to get beyond it and work through it. So when you're venting, you're talking about it from a place of wanting to understand the problem. When you're complaining, however, it comes from a place of victimization, how you are being victimized or stuck. And when you language that, you language it in that way, you actually help to perpetuate it. So when you're complaining, you're coming from a place of, I just can't, I'm sick of this. I can't do anything about it. These people, those people, the circumstances suck, blah, 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 blah. When your aim is not necessarily to do anything about it per se, as much as you just are annoyed and want to complain. Does that make sense?
I think a lot of people will agree with that off the cuff.
Yeah.
So let's get to, because ultimately what I see in that is you're really speaking about not the perspective of the source of the dialogue. We're really, in those split definitions, we're really speaking about the perception of the supposed audience and listener. Because as we've covered in gaslighting and conformity videos that we've done, how they perceive it doesn't mean that's how you meant it. All right, let's take a look at the definition here of complain. Okay. So the word complain is to find fault, lament, originally, okay? And that's complain.
Lament, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, complain is the verb of complaint. Complaint would be the noun, all right? So find fault, lament. Okay. So now let's take a look at what vent means.
That's great. I love that. Find fault. Excellent point. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And see, lament is to regret or be sorry, express grief. Okay. Yeah. And then fault, we know, is like a deficiency or a lack. Yeah. And what I really like that word choice.
Me too.
It's like the earthquake faults. Like you're in California, you know all about faults.
Oh,
right?
Yes. We're sitting on one, actually.
Right.
Literally.
Which is the weakness in between the crust. And just like when you talk about volcanoes, they have little faults and fissures that the lava pours from. The fault is the weak spot or the crack, the deficiency area, right? Okay, let's see what vent means here. Okay, so vent is to emit from a confined space as a verb. And then as a noun, it's the act of emitting or discharging, which is why I chose to have the volcanic eruption background today. Because if we compare this to the volcano inside of all of us, right?
Oh, good analogy. Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
metaphor, rather. Yes. Love
the
it.
venting is going to be to emit. It's going to come out, right?
To release. Yes.
Right.
Stress. It releases stress like faults do.
There you go. And this is
I get
why
the connection. Yes.
And this is why I'm going to bounce. This is what I'm going to bounce back and forth. So you've made your opening statement, so to speak, in this case, right? The trial of complaint versus venting, right? Yes. So, and my opening case remarks is going to be that right there to show that, just like you said, the venting happens through the fault. You see what I'm saying? Which is the complaint. Now, just to make some more clarity here with the words, and then we'll jump on to the conversation and dialogue. What we have here is, because when we go back to complaint, right? Real quick, complaint is the noun form. So what is that? That is com, right? Which is COM, which means, two verbs meaning with or together, as in combine, compress, or serving as an intensive to strengthen the force of the verb. So meaning to bring together, right? And then what is a plaint? Lastly, a plaint. Whoops, took me out.
Cool. I love the etymology. That's cool.
Yeah, it makes everything clear.
You do that. So important, because people are not just hearing our conversations, but they're understanding the true meanings of these words, and the parts of the words that have, like, if you have two words put together, each of those words have separate meanings. So that's really cool that you're emphasizing this element. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Because this is what really cements the truth, because we can talk about our emotions and feelings all day long, which people do. This is what makes some of our conversations with others so difficult, is that they're speaking on opinion and feeling an emotion, whether they realize it or not. That's why they're not connected to the truth. And they'll, that's when the gaslighting, all that stuff, conformity factors. But anyway, so plaint is mourning, and then there go that word again, but it's the full verb noun, lamentation. All right. Complaint is, or a plaint is mourning or lamentation. And
limitation. Did you
lamentation?
Lamentation.
Yeah.
Lamentation. Yes. Right.
Yeah. Because when we go back to complain.
To lament. Right.
Yeah. Lament is complain, which is to regret, be sorry, express grief. So let me ask you a question. Where does a complaint come from?
Where does a complaint come from? When somebody is unhappy about something that's occurring in their life, in any way, shape, or form, they're not happy with it, and they're having to deal with it. And a lot of times I would say complaint comes from being frustrated, feeling helpless, feeling like you're a victim. I think complaint is very much attached to a victim mentality. Yeah.
Okay.
It comes from a space of there's nothing you can do. Type of thinking. Because complaint tends to be a patternistic repetitive behavior. When complaint is on the table, it's usually something you've lamented about often. Whereas venting, that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes it could be one time you're just venting to get it out. And in the venting, you can look at it, you can observe it, you can break it down with friends and whatnot, whoever you're engaging conversation with on the topic, wanting to come to a solution, searching to find a way to remedy the situation. Whereas complaint comes from more of just griping, bitching, to use these words, but where you're just frustrated, these people, those people, and you'll see when people are complaining, they bring this subject up a lot, and it's just to like talk about its existence, and the aim is not necessary to understand why. They're just complaining about it. And the
So,
reason
so if they actually talk to all 150 people that they know about this once or twice, that means that they even brought it up potentially 300 times, but to you, you're only going to feel like you heard it twice. So you're going to say that they're venting to you when in reality they're complaining to everybody they know. You see how,
also,
that's
yes,
perspective of the listener.
How they're verbalizing it. If they're verbalizing it from a place of, how can I say this? That there's nothing can be done. When they verbalize it in such a way that, life is just, messed up. And they're just verbalizing of how life is just messed up. I'm just using this as an example. It's not verbalized in a way that there's any solution. It's like, well, this is just the way it is, and look at this, we have to deal with this, and da 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 da. It's different. When you're venting, it's usually coming from something that you've been holding in, like you said, like a volcanic thing. And the vent is like, oh, I'm so frustrated, and I can't stand having to deal with this stress, and I'm just feeling so overwhelmed, and why does this occur? It's more of a kind of like more of a question, you know what I mean, than it is a statement per se. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've talked about duality in all things. There's a duality in this. We're talking about the duality of the topic of venting versus complaining. One is not so much, and the other is there's benefits from it. You actually need it. Reason I bring it up is because there's a lot of gaslighting happening where someone's venting, wanting to work through a problem, and they're told that they're whining and complaining, and they're not. Their aim and their intention is to sort it. They're trying to sort it. And you see this a lot. People say, don't go on Facebook and complain. Well, what is that? You're saying complain, but we don't have a distinction, because that's not always true. They're not trying to complain. They're looking and seeking to understand the difficulty that's on their plate in that moment. Whereas complaining tends to be, like I said, more of, you're not looking for a resolve, you just want to complain. You know what I mean? You're just,
so
this sucks, and look at how these people just suck. You know what I mean? It has a different connotation when you're coming from complaint, to me.
No, that's fine, because that's gonna be the point of a lot of people are gonna gravitate to, because of the emotion. See, and when you take the emotion out of it and go to the equation of the truth, the duality is a factor of the same equation. It's just the positive and negative, the opposite sides of it. That's why I'm showcasing that it's the same, because everything you just said, right, is true. The only thing thing is, it's not the truth of the source is the truth of the audience. That's why I said that in the very beginning. The difference comes about when you're speaking to the person that's receiving it, not the person that's giving it, because you can't say that everybody has the same talking styles, everybody speaks the same way, use the same words. So somebody's going to hear that same statement like, oh, they're complaining. Another person will be like, no, they're just venting. So that's the issue with that. All right. Now,
well, the behavior is the same. You're expressing this dislike about a situation or a circumstance or a topic or whatever, but the intent is different. That's what I'm getting at. Some people just want to complain and they don't really want an answer. They just want to bitch.
Again, that's
some people
subjective to the listener.
And some people, they want. And the reason I think this is so important is because if people continue to tell people that when they're talking about problems, that they're whining, it keeps people from venting, which is essential in healing, which is essential in problem solving. What is what the difference is what your objective is in when you're talking about it, when you're bringing it up. What is your objective? What are you after?
Okay.
Some people are not after result and some are.
So
and that's the difference.
So again, that assessment is on a generalization. That assessment can only be made from the audience based on their opinion of what they're witnessing and experiencing. Because I have all that here. I have the separation that you just went over. Like, I'll touch on that real quick. Some people are going to say the difference between complaining is a path towards conflict. Venting is a path towards healing and your relationship and blah, 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 right? So they're going to say complaining is going to be when you have to believe that you're right, right? And then you only see it from your point of view and about the same issue over and over again. And participation, people need people to come in and support their views when they're complaining. Versus venting, they say that you're not looking to convince the listener whether you're right or wrong. It's normally a new issue and you don't need the listener to agree with your point of view. And they actually, ironically, they actually closed that point. You don't need the listener to agree with your point of view, just validate your emotion, which is the same as agreeing with you. But hold on, let's go over this real quick here that I have on the screen.
Okay.
So what it is that we complain. This is a statement from Winch. All right, there's the article information. You can go look it up in the audience later. So they say, we complain when we feel there's a significant gap between expectation and reality.
I find that when somebody's complaining, let's say they go into Facebook, they complain about something, or the next door app. Oh, these people, the neighbors, they're and so then someone will come on and say, well, why don't you do this? Well, no, because of this. And another person will go on, well, no, because of this. The complainer is not interested in a result. However, the venter is. They're interested in a result. That's why they're bringing it up. There's a difference.
So with that example you gave, the listener
they just want to be a victim. A complainer.
The listener responded that, hold on. With that example you gave, the listener responded that with a possible solution. And the speaker said, no, because this, that, and the other. The listener then replied with another solution from their mind. They said no again. So just because they said no to that doesn't mean they're not being receptive to it. They might have already tried it. Someone else may have already talked to them about that. They may have went and already ruled that out, or they just may have a reason why that doesn't work for them. So they're still open to ideas. Maybe the listener just didn't provide one that they haven't already, reviewed.
Okay. I'm talking about someone whose mind is closed. They're not open for a solution. They're not even looking for a solution. They just want to be a victim. They
So
just want to be a victim so they can look like they're being victimized. And it's these people out there and not them. So they're not receptive to any suggestions, and that's not even their aim. That's what I think the difference is.
so when a person
Complainers,
so when a
yeah.
person's venting, okay,
Mm-hmm.
when a person's venting and they go and you respond to them and say, hey, look, why don't you try this, that, the other? We've all seen the example in relationships where they be like, and they wouldn't even just let me vent. So when they say they didn't want you to comment on it, they just wanted you to listen because they were venting.
Well,
That's the same as being
right,
closed-minded in the
right,
situation.
right. Well, okay, so that's the thing. They're not venting. They're complaining. And that's why the person does not want to listen to them. They think it's venting, and it is not. They've gotten venting and complaining confused. That's why their partner doesn't want to hear it, because a lot of times they keep complaining about the same thing and don't want to do anything to change it. That's why I'm bringing this up. This is why this is so important, because people will say, I'm venting. No, you're not. You're actually complaining. Complainers want to be a victim. Venters want to get it out so they could start talking about it and start resolving it. And the difference is when somebody does bring in some kind of solution, they're open to it. They say, oh, I hadn't thought about it like that, or, oh, well, thank you. A complainer will continue to play the victim. And those, I just want to vent. No, you just want me to listen to you complain. You're not looking for a resolve. That's what I'm trying to say. And so many people get the two confused because they are very similar, but the aim is different. What that person that's doing the venting or complaining is after. You know what I mean?
I absolutely do. And that's why I'm really excited about this contest, because it's gonna be so much fun. So
and
watch
very
this.
important. Yeah.
So here's a good example. When we complain, we want to fix an injustice, they say. This is their words, which kind of supports what you're saying here. This is from the same article with Winch. For example, now this is the example they give. For example, if a mechanic overcharged you for an oil change, excuse me, you're likely to complain to bring down the price. But when we vent, they say, we are getting frustration out of our systems. For example, ranting to a coworker because traffic made you late. Now, in this example, it kind of uses complain incorrectly, because take out the word injustice, right? Because that's kind of like gaslighting the emotional thing. Oh, the injustice, you complain. You know, we know the complaint is the formal submission in the legal system, right? But here's what I'm getting at. So when you give the example as an oil change, I mean, it's not injustice, all right? You don't complain to bring down a price. You negotiate. See, that lament, like we talked about, is the regret, be sorry, grief, express grief about the price.
Yeah.
It's not negotiating though. It's a complaint. So this is what I'm showcasing, is how the complaining and the venting is the same thing. The action follows that step. The first step is to vent and or complain about it. And whether you're venting or whether you want to call it complaining, people get stuck in that first phase and then they don't do anything about it.
Okay.
The next step, action
right.
is in every satisfaction.
Yes.
So here, I got a role play example for you based off of this, okay?
Okay.
You ready? Because once we stop complaining, we can start negotiating. So here's the role play. I want you to play the car owner in this example here about the oil change, and I'll play the mechanic. So I want you to complain to me that the price of the oil change is too high.
Explain that the
How would you complain that the price to me, the mechanic, that the price of the oil change is too high?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to call it complaining. If I felt like a price is too high, I would just simply say, you know, I believe this price is too high. I think you're overcharging. That's all. I would just say, you know, I've looked around at various competitors and your price is considerably higher. I believe, you know, your rates are too high for your service. You know, I don't even know if that would be a complaint.
Okay.
But that's like, or you could just say, if someone was complaining, they'd be like, you know, I really don't like your prices, and you know, what's that about? I guess.
Okay. Now let's start from scratch. Hey, I ring you up. Here's the price. And now I want you to vent that the price is too high. To me, the mechanic.
Okay. That's okay. So like, that wouldn't be a place that you would vent.
Okay.
That's not a place where venting would apply. Venting is.
So I'm your friend after you paid the, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I got you. We'll take it in order. Okay, so we got you. You gave the complaint to me, the mechanic, that the rates was too high. And then here's gonna be my response. Hey, ma'am, I feel you on that. You know, the cost of everything is going up nowadays. We really provide our customers with the best value for the money. I know some places charge less, but they don't give you the same quality of service we do. We add in a few extra steps and everything like that to really take care of you and your machine. How would you like to pay for that today, cash or card? And we'll stop there, right? Now, you paid the bill. You're still in grieving about it. Now I'm your friend, or whoever later on, not the mechanic, somewhere else, so that you can be venting. Now vent to me about the price of the oil change being too high.
I mean, if the guy was saying that to me, I'd be like, I understand there's nothing you can do about it, but it does seem excessive. So
I'm your friend now. You left the mechanic shop.
Okay, this is kind of tricky because if you're, you know, you could also call that a person being assertive, saying, I really feel this is too high. Is there something to do about this? You know, so I don't know if the
hold on, time out.
You know, complaining is
time out, Trish. Time
yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Because I need the visual. So you complained to the mechanic while you were there. The mechanic responded, you paid the bill. Okay, at this point. You're home, you're somewhere else, you're at work, you're talking with your friends, your family about now let me hear you vent to them that the oil change bill was, that you thought the oil change bill was kind of high. Let me hear you vent.
Here's what I'm trying to say. Venting doesn't apply to this scenario. It doesn't apply. If you do say something, you complain, that's what you're doing. You're not venting. You're complaining, saying, it's a complaint, it's a grief. It's a grief-oriented thing. I have a grief, I have a beef with this price. Venting it doesn't apply. That's what I'm trying to say. That's not a scenario where venting is happening.
No, you could. Okay, so let me put it in perspective. If I was playing that role that you were playing earlier, we got the complaint to the mechanic out about the price. You did that. Okay, then I gave you the mechanic's response. Now you drove home and you're talking to husband, or you're talking on the phone to your girlfriend or your family member, and you're like, you know what? I went to this oil place today and they charged me $340 for oil change. And I thought that shit was kind of high. I don't know. I've never paid $300 something for oil change before. They said they gave some more parts or did some special stuff to it. The other places don't. What? I don't even know about. See, that would be venting about what you experienced earlier that day that would be venting. Okay. The thing is, right. All right. So that we're on the same page. So now that we have the example, you see how the reason I wanted you to do that is because what was going to happen if the way you complained, if you did it in your style, when you went and vented to the next person, you would have been almost saying the same words identically to the next person. All right. So the thing is, the difference in that situation, right? This is why I said complaining and venting is the same, because that mechanic is going to, that mechanic is receiving your input. Because look, I've had 13 years of customer service experience. They train you to express empathy, not sympathy.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? All right. Yes. So what we know is whether you're complaining or venting, we're going to empathize with you, and we're going to go ahead and give you and ask you how you want to pay for that. Okay. Because what we're going to basically process that is the same equation, that the complaint and venting is the same thing. Because at the end of the day, you came here for the oil change. The oil change is completed. You know, they told you in the beginning what it was. So it's done now. So you got to pay. Now, the action part. See, that's what I'm saying. Whether you're complaining or venting, it's the same. But what you do after the complaint or the vent is the action. Don't get stuck in step one, which is complaining or venting. The next step is the action. Okay. And you started to go there once I brought up the vent about it. See, because you said, hey, is there something we can do about that now? But you didn't do that when you were, hold on. No, that's negotiating. Now you're entering into the negotiation. Hey, I've given you my complaint, or I vented to you how I felt, right? What is there something we can do about that? Is now you're starting to negotiate, which is a totally different step or phase of, you know, the dominoes falling. But if you want to get stuck in the first step, which is complaining or venting, that's still the first step. That's why it's the same thing.
It's not.
The action has to come next.
It's the intent behind why you're saying it. That's the difference. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, look, I'll give you a scenario.
Hold on. I'll say this, and then I want to hear your scenario.
Okay.
The intent doesn't matter. That's why I said it's the that split that you're talking about when you're talking about intent is based on the perception of the audience, not the giver. That's why the mechanic is still going to charge you regardless if it was a complaint or event. Or the mechanic might say, you know what, I feel sorry for you. I have a coupon here that we're using this month and it's 15% off. And you never negotiated. So you might have complained or vented, and they might have just gave you 15% off. But what I'm trying to showcase here, and I'm gonna give you the floor in a moment, is that the complaint and the vent is the same step. It's the same, it's the spread of different actions in the same step. So whether your intent was to get a discount or just complain, they might have pulled out a coupon for you. Or they might have charged you full price. It doesn't matter what the intent was. Until your intent is to negotiate the price, you know what I mean? Go ahead. What do you have?
I don't know if complaint or vent applies to that scenario, actually. That's more of like asserting yourself when you feel a price is too high. You're like, I think this is too high. Can you, okay, so anybody that would bring it up, their only intent would be to get a cheaper price. Do you know what I mean? Now, if you're complaining, you would go to management and complain about the price. But if you say it to the person that's just working behind the counter that doesn't have any control over that, you know, it's in a way, I guess you would be complaining. Venting, yeah, it's okay. I don't know how to.
It's
Again,
difficult. It's
it
difficult
really
because
is
they're the same.
when you
they're the same
vocalizing what your intent is, what you're after when you bring it up. Some people just like to complain. They're not looking for a solution or anything. They just want to gripe about it. Then there's when you bring it up because you actually want a result. That's what I'm talking about. Those are the two distinctions that I'm talking about. Whether the titles are right, okay, now we might have to revisit that. But I still say venting is more of a wanting and looking and a desire to look for a result. A complaint is, yeah, it's just, yeah, we're just going to go around in circles here. Let me give you an example of how I kind of see it.
Here, before you do that, let me give you this. I'm going to revisit what we said earlier. One thing, because under venting, one of the key elements under the difference between complaining and venting is that you supposedly, when one is venting, you don't need the listener to agree with your point of view, just validate your emotion. Go ahead. Because see, that's why I'm like, this is gaslighting at its finest.
This is why I'm talking about it, because I'm tired of when someone is trying to put something out there so it can be looked at, it can be openly discussed from a place of an open mind. They're venting because they're like, I'm frustrated about this. What do you think about? They're looking for feedback. Complainers aren't. That's the difference. Complainers come from more of a victim mentality. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend who is in an abusive relationship that I've been dealing with for years. And she will tell me I'm venting. No, we've had this same conversation for 12 years. This is not a vent. You're not looking for a solution. You want to complain about something for which you are not going to do anything about. That's the difference to me. Complaining is a place of there's nothing you can do. Now, addressing something that's wrong, like if a price is too high and you assert yourself and say, this is too high, I don't consider that necessarily a complaint. I consider that you're asserting, hey, this is kind of high. Can you work with me here and bring the price down? Your intent is to get a resolve. So I would say, I wouldn't even say it's either venting or complaining. You're addressing a problem. But when you're talking about emotions and problematic issues, you know, if it really just comes down to why you're bringing it up to begin with. What are you after in talking about it? What are you after? Are you after feedback? Or do you just want to just keep talking about it with no desire to end the problem, to solve the problem? And so I get frustrated because I see a lot of people that are literally venting because they're like, I'm frustrated with this. What do you guys think about this? This is happening to you. Have you found a way to resolve it? You know, it comes from a mindset of wanting to come to a resolve, wanting to solve the problem. But there are many people that just complain and are not interested. They just want to keep
What's the first step
complaining.
What's the first step of solving a problem?
And this is where there's a similar talking about it. But in the end, you know, the person that's doing the talking, you know, if they're not receptive to someone else's view or some way to help work it out, they just want to keep complaining. You know, that to me is what I consider a complaint. That is just, or whining or whatever. Yeah, but I could be very wrong. But really my aim in having this discussion with you is the gaslighting that I see happening when someone's truly trying to work through a problem. They're truly trying to solve it. They don't want to be a victim. Some people, they're doing it so they can look like the victim. That's what they want, is to be a victim. Just talk about this thing that just keeps happening to them. And they're not interested in what anyone has to say. They're defensive. They'll just continue to say all the reasons why they're a victim. And what I get frustrated is when someone that's actually venting and trying to work through a problem, someone will gaslight them and tell them they're whining, when that's not true. They actually want to, their aim is to get to where they don't have to complain about it anymore. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. And maybe my terminology is wrong, but ultimately I'm having this conversation because I see many people that are trying to solve problems constantly getting the kibosh and told that they're just whining, when that's not actually what's happening. And so I'm not as interested in being right as finding some clarity, because I don't think it's fair for people that are truly wanting to solve a problem to be told they're just whining, because it's not true. So
Good
I don't
points. Good points. And me being the equation based dealing with infinities,
know.
that's why they're the same thing to me, because like you said, we've covered a lot, and the only reason you've stumbled so much with it in some of this is because you can't, in certain areas you can't differentiate the two, and that's why I made in my opening remarks that the difference or the interpretation of the difference is based on the perception of the audience or the listener, not where it came from. Like this. So this is what some of the professional psychologicalists people be saying here. Complaining allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events, which we know, right? We're not even going to talk about what we think, what we feel. What we know is, before you can solve a problem, you have to express the dissatisfaction with the people or events. So that's complaining by definition, right?
I
Now,
don't agree with that.
okay. Now, this is why I'm saying that the fact that you're looking at these statements, whether we went over the one earlier about venting, and you said you didn't agree with that, you thought that was more of a complaint, and the fact that we're looking at this one and it says this is what a complaint is, which you're saying you don't agree with, it's helping to show that venting and complaining are the same thing. They only have the different labels based on who wants to assign them. And that's where you get into the manipulation of titles again. So I'll finish
Okay,
this statement and then I want to see what you got to say about
I
this,
like
because it
that.
ties into this. So complaining allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events, but persistent complaining may be a sign of a greater dissatisfaction within ourselves. You see? And then it says read
Okay,
more about what
read that
complaining.
first part of it about complaining again.
Yeah, it says complaining allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events, but persistent complaining may be a sign of greater dissatisfaction within ourselves. Read more about what complaining can teach us about our true desires and needs. So I'll interject this real quick and then I'll let you take over. See, this is why I'm saying whether you're venting about it or complaining about it, which is really the same thing, if you get to the point where you start to realize the issue or the problem is within the self, that's where we go back into all those other things that we were talking about, where it's hard for people to change because they don't want to believe that there's something wrong with them. So it's not really that they're complaining at that point, it's that they're trapped in that cycle of the other mental illnesses now, or emotional unintelligence. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead.
Okay. The way that I see it is that whole thing that you read, what complaint is. The first section was venting to me. The second section is whining. The difference between venting and complaint is what you're after when you're doing it. Yeah, I'm still going to stand on that, because I still say, what people don't like about whiners and complainers is they're not looking for a result. And that's why you're like, I don't want to hear your whining no more. You keep whining about this. Whereas venting, they'll talk about it a lot because they're trying to find an answer. And they're two different things. When you're talking to try to figure it out, to feel better, to find a result, that's when you want to vent. But complaining is just an empty, like, I just want to be a victim. I don't want to resolve. And it could be because there's something within themselves they haven't addressed. But either way, they don't want to. They're not interested in a resolve. And that is the part that I'm most earnestly concerned about. I don't like that people get pigeonholed with the whining when that's not what their intent is. They're not just wanting to complain. They actually want to solve the problem, even if they have to keep bringing it up to figure it out. And so the whiners that just want to be victims, the person that's not doing that and doesn't want to be a victim and actually wants to empower themselves and learn from whatever it is they're trying to sort through is getting gaslit and told they're a whiner, meaning they're not looking for a solution. They just want to complain. That's the key here.
So
that's the key.
I think that's you make some points that many people are going to relate to because that's how they want to see it. So the complaining here, right, allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events. Now, when we go back to
the behaviors
what they said,
same. Right.
When we go back to what they said about venting, right? What did they say about venting?
Okay.
Here we go.
Now,
Hold on,
we're gonna.
Hold on, I'm pulling it up.
I know what the behavior is the same, but why they're doing it is different. That's what I'm trying to make the distinction of.
Yeah.
Why?
But
the why.
But we can't tell you another person why they're doing something. That's
Yes.
why I'm trying to get you to see that. That's why I said that's all based on the perception of the listener and the audience.
Yes, we can. We can. You can tell a difference. And that's why I get annoyed, because I can tell when a person is open, when they put something out there that's bothering them, a problem that they're dealing with, and they earnestly want to figure it out, and they're open for feedback. That is a person that's venting to me. That is a person that is like, they're getting it out because they want to solve it. But there are people that do the same exact thing. They complain, they put it out there, but they're not interested in solving it. They just want to complain. And complaint is a repetitive thing, whereas eventually when you're venting and you're after a resolve, you will find one. But what I don't like in the gaslighting is making the person that's venting that actually wants to solve the problem, and it might take a few times of talking about to sort it out, they're getting told they're whining, when a whiner just wants to whine. And a person that's venting is venting because it's a problem that's bothering them that they want to address.
Okay, so here's the point I was going to make. Right here it says, but when we vent, because this is from the same article that I showed in the beginning from what's his name, Wentz, or what's his name in the very beginning, Winch, W-I-N-C-H, that you kind of agree with when it defined complaint. So this is from the same source. So what they say here is that, but when we vent, we are getting frustration out of our systems. All right, now watch this.
Oh, okay.
They said when we vent, we're getting frustration out of our system. Now, when we go here, complaining allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events. That's the same statement. Expressing, identify this right here identifies complaining as venting, because as getting frustration out is the same as expressing dissatisfaction, ... Getting frustration out, ... is the same as expressing dissatisfaction, ... Remember, nothing changes without action. So they're both the same thing. And what we need to know is that, are you going to take action or not?
Okay, cool, perfect. Whining is repetitive. Venting is not.
But we're talking about complaining versus venting,
right,
not whining.
But now, okay. Whining is when somebody does something, or complaining, constant complaint. They just complain, and their frame of mind is it's hard to.
You're making the points you need, that the people need to know. Whining is something different.
Well, whining.
We're talking about complaining versus venting.
Right. Okay. So,
That's now you see where I'm at.
okay. Again, the reason I'm bringing this up is
I know why you're bringing it up.
because one person wants to be a victim and the other one doesn't. And that's the difference. And there is a difference.
That's
They're both doing the same thing. They're getting a feeling out, right? But this person is not the complainer, isn't necessarily looking for a resolve. That's all. Because and these things need some clarity. And even in some of those people's that you're reading, I think we need a revision here. What's becoming clear about this is we really need we need a different word for each of them. We need not just one word that's explaining two different scenarios, because that's what's happening. And that's what I don't like. We need another way to we need another word outside of venting and complaining in. We need something else that allows a person that's actually after wanting change and one that isn't, and they're blurred now. So they're getting thrown in the same basket when they're not in fact the same. And that's what I'm frustrated about.
So here's the thing about the English language. It's called an equivocal language. Equivocal.
I think you mentioned this before. Yep.
Yes, which means different words have the same meaning. This is why you're
two different things, right?
No.
It's one word for two different things, right?
No, that's one way. And also you have more than one word meaning the same thing.
Yes.
So this is why I'm showcasing here the complaint and the venting is the same thing.
Yes.
What happens after that is what makes a difference.
And what's great about our podcast here is showing how confusing and how the devil's in the details, once again, blurring the lines, allowing abuse, allowing people that actually want resolve, actually are talking or venting, getting it out to be looked at and to feel better and to work through it, and others that are not actually after that. They just want to be a victim. And you get thrown in with these people, and it's not fair. I don't like it. It bothers me because I see it happening a lot. And I'm like, no, you can tell what the person that's complaining or venting, whatever you want to call it, what they're after.
We can assume.
It's what you can know.
The average person. We're talking about the average, not the people that can read minds and energies. The average person.
They don't know. We don't have clarity along this. That's why I'm bringing it up. There's a lot of lack of clarity here.
It's clear that they're the same. Well, it's the following steps. Because watch this. I got what you're talking about right here. Because see, I come with the receipts. So here we go. This is from you see the link there. It's Dr. Lisa Vogel, whatever. Somebody that paid a lot more money to go to school than I did, right? So not that means anything, but watch this. Right. Complaining rewires your brain for negativity, which I hear you saying in your own way. Now, the rest of the statement says, complaining rewires your brain for negativity, pessimism, and unhappiness. The human brain loves familiarity and efficiency. So what you feed your brain, it will settle for it and seek more of it. In other words, the more you complain, the more you make this the default mode of your brain's operation. So the example I have for this, right, to showcase to you how venting and complaining is the same, even as you're using it as the negativity factor, right, is if we were to we're looking at the volcano in the background here, but if we had a balloon that we could somehow have right here in the center, right, and blow it up on this side with positivity, okay, and now it's fully, we blew it up, some magical pump, and it blew up and it expanded over here positively. This is positive pressure in engineering, right? So if we create a vacuum or vent the positive pressure, the balloon will start to shrink as it vents and the atmosphere pushes it back down to become neutral. However, if we were able to keep that venting happening, it would actually turn itself inside out and start to inflate within itself, inside out, and blow up over this side. Now it would be full of, that would be known as negative pressure or creating a vacuum. Okay. But if we're talking about a balloon, it's just going to expand over on this side, full of negativity in this example. So over here, let's say we blew it up with positivity. It's full of positivity. Now, if it keeps venting, it could go negative and start to inflate negatively. That's the same thing as this example here about complaining rewires your brain for negativity.
Okay.
So if you vent too much, you're going to go negative as well. That's because why? Because venting and complaining is the same thing.
Okay. Complaining is repetitive. Venting is not.
That volcano is repetitively venting in the background there the whole video.
That's complaining. That's not venting. That's the difference.
So
when you're, when you finally get to where it's something that's been bothering you, festering in you for a long time, and you get it out, that's one thing. If you keep doing it, you're now complaining. That's the difference to me. Now, because we're on social media and we don't know this person, we can't actually know if they're venting or complaining. We don't know them personally. Now, for instance, like my friend was saying, I'm tired of hearing this complaint. You keep talking about this over and over. That's not venting. Venting is, I just got to get it out and that's it. But if you keep doing it, you're now moving into the complaining mode.
What we're proving here is we've proved that even in your articulation and responses, we've proved that venting and complaining is the same thing. What you're speaking of is practicing insanity, continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different result.
Okay, but my concern is, I don't really care what the titles of the words are that they're choosing, whatever, is that people that don't know you, they've never met you, and you go on your page and this is the first time you've complained or whatever. It's not. Why do people not like complaint? Why are they more receptive to vent than complaint? Because complaint is repetitive, whereas vent is bringing it up, wanting it to be addressed. But if you just keep talking about it and you're not interested in addressing it, you just want to keep complaining about it over and over and over. That's why complaining is so annoying. That's why people they'll say whining. So either way, whatever we call them, we need some revisions in this area in our English language that decipher the difference between the two. Could be very helpful, because when someone finally gets the courage to talk about something openly, they get the kibosh and told they're complaining, and they're not. They're actually trying to address a problem from a place of wanting to solve it. That's the thing. We need a new way to talk about what complaint actually is, and what addressing a problem is, and wanting to address it, not have it become a complaint.
So the new way for those that need a new way is what we just did today, which is express that what we need to do. Okay, because like the opening thing was, your stance was you were going to show how they were different. My stance was I was going to show how they were the same. So it looks like instead of saying that we need a new way, the new way is the acceptance that the complaint and the vent are the same. What needs to change is what happens after that. So either that person is going to say they want to do something different in their life, but they're not, they're not producing any action. Or the listener needs to realize, hey, this person keeps coming to me with the same thing and they need to do something different, which may be to tune them out, not allow them to keep coming back. Because either way, on whether it's the giver or the receiver of that, the issue is that insanity factor. Because if I'm going to keep listening to this person that keeps telling me the same thing and I feel like something different is going to happen, I can't blame them because I'm practicing the insanity there. If they keep talking about it and they think it's going to change just from them talking about it, they're practicing insanity. So either way, we get to step one, complain or vent about the shit that you feel is fucked up. Why? Because complaining and venting is the same thing. Step two needs to be different than step one. And that's where
the lines get blurred.
Yeah, because if you're not progressing to step two, then you're into insanity. It's something different. Or like you're saying, if you want to keep doing this, it's whining. But what we've proven is step one, and then it goes into something else. So we can't say there's the difference. That's why we can't clearly define a difference between complaining and venting, because we're talking about elements of the same step. And that difference in wordplay is exactly what gaslighters use to gaslight. No, you're not venting, you're complaining, and you need to shut up. Why? That's a gaslighter tactic.
Okay, right, because right, because like, for instance, I have a friend, I love him dearly, but for years I've heard him complain about his friends, and he doesn't do anything to open his circle and change and find other friends and find ones that actually meet his needs. Now, but at the same time, he'll vent with me about a problem and he'll say, this is really frustrating, and we'll talk it out, and he'll go, oh, I get it. And then he's done. And I don't hear from him again. He's solved it. Complaint tends to come from a place of continually talking about it and over and not doing anything to change it. So
that's insanity. That's not
it
complaint.
is insanity.
Because look,
maybe that's it. Maybe that's what we need to do, is say, like, you're saying this is complaining, when like, either way, I think we're after the same thing here, just because, like, ultimately what I'm after in having this conversation is not continuing to put the kibosh on people that actually want to solve their problems.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't want to complain over and over. They actually want to deal with and address the problem, not complain. But they have to get it out and talk about it to admit it's bothering them in the first place in order to do that. So I get frustrated when people that don't know them make an assumption that they're just complaining, when that's not what's happening. Even though it looks the same, the behavior's the same, but they actually want to feel better. They actually want to address it. But if you don't do anything to address it, you become a complainer.
No, don't. That's right? What you become insane.
Insane. Right. Yes. Okay, maybe that's it. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so maybe we need to reword it as, no, it's just, what I'm trying to do is stop the gaslighting of people that need help. Like, I see so many people saying, you're coming on a social place, doing your dirty laundry or whatever.
Yeah.
And we don't want to hear it, and whatever.
That's
and making that person feel guilty.
Right.
And pigeonholing them and telling them they're a whiner. And it's like, it's not accurate. It's just not accurate. It has a negative connotation to it, and I don't like that. So maybe we should just remove whining and complaining altogether out of the vocabulary and read it. I don't know.
It's just like saying sunny and bright. Somebody's gonna be like, well, no, it's bright when there's no clouds in the sky. Somebody else is gonna be like, isn't that sunny? You know what I'm saying? Then they'll be debating. So that's what's happening here. The reality is, complaint and vent is the same thing. Now, where you apply it and how you apply it is open to interpretation. It's an infinity of ways you could do it. And whether you do it this way, somebody's going to say it's the other thing. And whether you do it this way, somebody's going to say it's the other way that way. What is clear is that that's a step where people are losing sight of the issue is what happens after that. They're still wanting to call that this part of the process. For example, when we in Greenbelt, in my Greenbelt experience, right? They tell you when you're working on these large projects, you should be looking at least like 6 to 9 months to spend on this project. So for 6 to 9 months, we're talking about the same fucking thing. Now, that doesn't mean we're in the same spot that we started at with the conversation. But the high level overview is, of course, we're still talking about the same problem to resolve it for 6 to 9 months. So if I go on social media, per your example, and I talk about the same, which is kind of like what we do, talk about the same
which
thing.
is great. It's all good. The conversation is so important. So yes.
So because there's such an affinity with this shit. Now, to someone that wants to not put the work in, they're gonna be like, oh, you're talking about the same thing, because they don't recognize how much is in there that you got to deal with, how much is actually present. So anyway, the point is this. If I go, well, this is why some of the people feel the way they do about like my content and like your content. But if I go on there and I'm talking about this same issue, like mental health, if you go on my page, I can tell you right now, the last year of posts is based on mental health and emotional intelligence. They may look different as hell. Yesterday's post may look different as hell than the day before that. But it's the same thing to me that I've been working on because I've been studying. So what I'm getting at is we talk about this shit for 6 to 9 months. You're going to have people talking about why they complaining. Damn, they vent too much. You know, they're right, because they're not involved in the healing factor. So it doesn't mean shit to them. It's an annoyance. Okay. To the people that are trying to make the impact, it's a resource. So whether we're venting or complaining, that's the same. That's why it's based on, I'll say this and I'll give you the floor. That's why that perception is based on the receiver, like I said in the beginning. How much value is it to them? Because that's how they're going to feel about it. And how they feel about it is going to determine how they describe it. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, I wonder if it has to do with approach as well. Like if you have an issue that bothers you, would it be different to put it on the table when you go to your social platform or you talk openly with your friends or just with a friend or whatever? If you put a question on the table, why is this like this? Like when you go to the guy with the, the prices are high. Why are your prices so high? That's more problem solving oriented than complaining. Your prices are so high, man, versus why are your prices so high? I mean, this place over here is like 50% cheaper. So why? Then you're looking for an answer. And I think that's kind of what I'm sort of getting at is when someone will go, like I'm part of this group called the Ram Dass group, and they're wonderful. They're having these conversations we're having and breaking things down. And someone will go, why is there so much corruption in the world? Someone will tell them they're complaining. But if they're asking a question, they actually want to get to a resolve on the issue. They're not just complaining, they actually want to know why. And that's the part that I don't like, when people will come in and tell them they're complaining. No, they're not. They're asking a very pertinent question that's beckoning an answer. And so it's muddied. And
so, look,
and how we communicate our approach and everything as well, I think is really important, so that you have clarity. People do understand where you're coming from and what you're after when you're bringing these things up. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just something that came to my mind.
It totally makes a lot of sense, Trish. As we reviewed earlier, complaining allows us to express our dissatisfaction with people and events. So if they go on there and say, hey, why is there so much corruption? And someone responds to them, hey, you're complaining. That's the truth. The problem is the emotional attachment to how people feel about complaining versus venting. It's an emotional attachment. It's not, it's
Okay.
not true. It's not the reality. They are actually
Right.
complaining. At the same time, they could be venting because they're the same thing. Now,
Okay.
that person over there was using that moment, though, the responder, we could say, was using that moment to gaslight them, to intimidate them, to all of that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they were absolutely complaining and venting because that's the same thing about corruption.
Okay. So it is, so it is the same thing. And so there's duality in all things. And so one person will see the dark side of that behavior and the other will see the light or interpret it that way. They will say, oh, you're whatever, whether they use the word venting or complaining. And maybe we just, I don't know, but like they'll just go, oh, you're venting, whatever, or oh, you're complaining. And some other person will say, oh, he's just venting, or he's, maybe he's complaining, but there's the good and the side aspects of whatever you want to call it. And that's the part I'm concerned about. Whatever it is called, I don't like that it gets the kibosh no matter what. I don't like that. I don't want a world where we're not allowed to talk about stuff because you get pigeonholed that it's bad and wrong for whatever reason, and whatever you want to call it. That's what I'm
I agree with
after
you on
more
that.
than the title per se. I'm after, I don't like the gaslighting and how can we move beyond it? And I'm in this conversation with you trying to figure that out,
Yeah.
trying to find a better way, a more effective way that comes from a place of allowing and maybe not so much judging that I'm also guilty of, because this gaslighting way that we do things is so prevalent that even I find myself doing it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I just want a new way, a new and improved way of engaging in general. So
That's a great desire, and we're going to get there one step at a time. And the step that we took today is we realized that complaining and venting is the same thing, and then something else happens or needs to happen after that initial complaint or venting, or else we're dealing with insanity or gaslighting or some other shit. But now we can stop this argument and debate about who's venting, who's gaslight. I mean, who's venting, who's complaining, because from my standpoint, being a person that likes to try to help people until they get on my nerves, um, I don't care if you're complaining or venting. I'm going to offer you the solution, because to me, I see it as a great exercise of my problem solving ability. So you might have, not you personally, but you might have been complaining, or you might have just been venting. And I had to realize, I learned that a few years ago, because I had a person that was telling me stuff, and I was like, okay, look, this is what we need to do. Because I'm always like a we, you know what I mean? Like, it's your issue, but here's how we gonna I'm gonna help
me,
you.
not me,
Right.
right?
You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
they got irritated and upset. And when you come back around to it, they were like, I was just venting, and like you didn't even let me vent, and you was trying to tell me what to do. I didn't want to know what to do. I just wanted to vent. I was like, huh.
Oh, this is the gray area. This is why that's so frustrating.
And this is
I
what I'm
love
saying.
this.
So to
Yeah.
me, that's why I said opening statement. That whole judgment of which one you want to categorize this person with is
It's
based on
not as
the
important. Yeah.
perception of the receiver, the listener, the audience. Because a person
Yeah.
that wants the information is going to find it valuable, or a person that wants the opportunity to help is going to see the opportunity to help. They don't say, oh, you're complaining or you're venting. They say, okay, here's the solution. So that's all based on the perception of the listener or the audience, and what they want to, how they want to manipulate the giver, despite what their intent was. And I'll showcase that again with what I said earlier. You could have been complaining to the mechanic, and they pulled out a coupon for you. You could have been just venting while you were pulling out your checkbook, and they could have felt sympathy for you and pulled out that same coupon. because that step is the same thing, and you have different styles, and who's going to tell somebody that need to standardize how they fucking feel and talk?
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
up to the
Yes.
listener to
Love that.
interpret
Yeah.
it, the truth of what you're trying to get out.
Yeah. The standardizing, the title, again, we come back to the title. So
The gaslighting.
you know what I mean? It's like so I think this is very important,
Very powerful.
extremely important. Yes. When you go into a public forum, your own page or someone else's or whatever, you go into a group and you put something on the table that you want to discuss, I think that a way that we could better communicate in a place that's from a respectful manner of when the person puts it on the table, are you looking for a solution up for this? Are you looking for advice, and is that why you're putting it on here? Because people can, if you put it on there, it's as if you're asking for advice. You're not actually, if you put a thing on a post in a group and you say this, and whatever, it's like you're wanting people to comment, or why would you put it there? So I just think
yes.
Approach is really important too. And when we adhere to talking about a problem, when we are wanting to address a problem, complain, vent, whatever you want to call it, I think whatever you call it is not as important. The only reason why I was trying to decipher the difference is because I see people that actually want change getting gaslit and shut down, especially when they're bringing up really important topics that deserve to be worked through, but we can't solve them if we don't talk about them. And so I don't like people getting gaslit wanting to talk about important issues that affect all of us. So our way of communicating is really, it could use some revamping.
I think
that's
you're
what
right.
we're doing here.
I can actually agree with you with that. And I'll say it like this, because I mentioned how I did the customer service experience world for Discover Financial for 6 years, large corporations that spend millions, if not billions of dollars on training us in topics like active listening. And somebody like me actually may have took it much more serious than the person sitting next to me, right? But I say that to say, this is why you hear me so sternly point out the fact that it's not the giver of that conversation. It's not the person that's speaking. It's based on the perception of the listener or the audience, because based on their active listening, right, or their projection issues, or they're wanting that person to conform, or all of those stuff that we talked about in our other videos, is going to determine how their brain receives the opportunity or the message. And then that's going to determine what they output back to the person. So with my experience, I can easily say, imagine how much more would get done if people stop putting so much energy in trying to figure out if a person was complaining and venting, because there really is no difference, as we proved. But imagine how much more would get done if they could just accept it. And here's what I want to point out here, and I want to hear what you guys say about this. Yeah, the people's commenting on people's posts. Yeah, because that's amazed me when people put up a post and I comment on there and they're like, we don't watch videos of it. What anyway, so I'm not gonna type 10,000 words. That's why on your post, so you can get mad that I type 10 paragraphs. That's why we do these videos. I can just drop the link in your under your post and people can learn from it. But I digress with that. Here's what I want to say though. A lot of times what I find is that people often get stuck, because I used to do this too. I used to be like, somebody would come and they would be saying something and I'll be trying to fix them, right?
Right.
And what I had to learn is that sometimes they came to me because it was never about them. And it what opened my, I had a connection, because I got this other saying that sometimes when I talk to people, or not sometimes I say the saying to people, but when I talk to people, I often look at it as I'm not actually talking to them. I'm talking to the Most High or the universe or the source through them, which is where we get that everybody's a reflection or a portal into some portion of that whole massive source or infinity. So I always have this mindset that I'm not actually, more often than not, I'm not talking to, like right now, I'm not talking to Trish. I'm talking to the universe through Trish. And you're a filter, you see, and because of your makeup, you tune the light of the infinity into a certain frequency beam and beam your light. You radiate, you shine you radiate Trish, right? So anyway, now if we look at it like that, right? I had to accept that sometimes the reason why it may appear that people are practicing insanity when they come to me with information is because they didn't come to me with the information for me to, or the complaint or the venting so that I could help them. They came to me with the complaint or venting so I could understand the world, to help the world. That's why I pointed the picture out that maybe the listener is having insanity issues as well, because they're going to keep allowing them to come and do this when they're supposed to get the message and go do something with it for other people, maybe even themselves.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
Does it seem to you, because it does seem to me that venting has a positive connotation and complaining has a negative connotation. When people say I'm just venting, it's acceptable. When people say I'm complaining, you're complaining, it's not acceptable. And that's interesting to me because it's the same thing. So that addresses the duality of that behavior in a sense.
If you're asking me from, that's a great question, by the way. And if you're asking me from the standpoint of society as a whole and or generally speaking, I would absolutely agree with you. I would say it's people like me and you know, others like me, and now you're a part of this group that can say, I don't get caught up in that because I see the equation as a whole, the whole infinity. And that's why I opened up with, I'm gonna show you how they're the same thing. You see what I'm saying?
And maybe that's the problem of, you know, they're the same thing, but one has a positive connotation and the other has a negative, and people can use either one. And I don't like that. I don't like that. Why can't it just be okay to talk about it, right? I mean, if
let me
you
say
are
this because
complaining,
I want you to build
what's
off of
wrong
this with that.
complaining?
I want you to build off of this with that statement while you got the floor. But let me throw this in there for you.
Okay.
Connotation, right? I'll translate that as the implied emotional attachment. You see what I'm saying? So when you hear me say emotional attachments, and I don't have that because of infinity.
I get that.
All right, go ahead. So that's a distortion factor. That doesn't, the connotation doesn't mean it's the reality.
Right, but it has a connotation.
Oh yeah.
And one is acceptable and the other isn't. When in fact this thing is happening. So again, the gaslighting happens because there's confusion. And so maybe what we need to do moving forward is both are okay. They're both necessary. You know,
they're both the same thing.
if yeah, whatever you want to, it doesn't matter. They need to be allowed, because we can't get past where we are if we can't be how we're really feeling, whether you call it complaining or venting or whatever. Addressing a problem, asserting yourself, discerning, you know, the action is necessary for us to understand our behaviors and why we do them. And I just, my objective in having this show is really not so much, now that we've had this talk, defining one from the other. It's more that I don't like to see self-expression getting the kibosh under these titles.
And I think that's a great, that's a great transition for the next show.
I love it. Yes, because I'm not after being right. I just want an answer. I want a better way.
Mm-hmm. It's like with that, it's like, I appreciate that, because when you say, like, that's part of the thing about the supposed, I'll put the supposed in quotations, the supposed definition of venting was you weren't being, not you personally, but they define it as that person's not after wanting to be right. They just want you to validate their emotions. I'm like, well, that's the same thing as or not being right or having someone agree with them. They just want their emotions validated, which is like, okay, because if I tell you, hey, yeah, that's an emotional attachment you're applying and you're emotionally wrong, then you're going to come back and be mad because I spoiled the venting episode because you wanted me to validate your emotions. But that'd be me trying to be the problem solver, right? You see what I'm saying? So it's just like, why show that out? All those, this is one of the perfect benefits of not doing titles. It allows you to be open-minded to everything. And then you can see what's really going on and how to really get over here if that's where you're trying to go. You know?
And look, and so what we did, we debated whether the two meant the same thing and whatever, and what was happening there. We're not talking about the behavior and the outcomes of this behavior. You get into the title. Well, no, he's venting. No, he's whining. And they're arguing about that. Mm-hmm. And the problem that was on the table doesn't get addressed because it gets the kibosh plus the title. This is an excellent example of the title and why it is so dangerous and how it can get in the way from progress.
And your devil's in the details quote that you like. And that's why I said, that's why I said earlier that the title ruins a lot of things because it's the ego, it's egomania, right? That of the listener that actually causes that title to have some sort of value or substance, whether it's negative or positive, whatever they want to do. The opportunity is still present. Yes. And that's why it's important to know that sometimes people are coming to you with information, whether they're venting or complaining, however you want to label it. And it may not be for you to help them. It may be for something that you're going to realize you needed to hear yourself for something you're working on in your life, either for yourself or for those around you. And it may not even be present today. Somebody may come to you with a complaint and you might be like, oh my God, this person's complaining. And 2 years from now, your family member goes through the same thing. And you're like, you know what? I remember this person was getting on my nerves one day talking about, and this is what I thought did. Hey, would that help you? And they'd be like, oh my God, thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. And it'd be all because you were so annoyed at that moment because you thought it was about them when it was really all about you the whole time. But
so true.
To close that statement.
Mirror.
Yeah, yes. To close that statement, hold that mirror thought. This is why I was saying that. Oh, go ahead. It'll come back to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it.
No.
I was just saying I love it because everything is a mirror. There's so much of that going on. Projection. I do it all the time. It's impossible not to. We're all human. We're all struggling with our human selves and our stuff, so to speak. And so triggers and all those things come up, and this is why what we're doing is so important, because just having this conversation is going to help us get beyond this way of doing things that we've been doing that don't serve us.
Yeah. It was something I said earlier in the video. That's why I was like, it don't really matter. But what it was imagine, because what you said a moment ago, it was kind of like a repetition of what I was saying earlier too, where I was like, imagine how much more would get done if people stop putting so much time and energy, or which could be dismissing people altogether, like you said, in your own way. Imagine how much more would be able to be accomplished if people stop trying to apply the labels or of complaining versus venting, like, and then just accepted that this person was expressing themselves, right?
And that's okay.
And are we going to do something about it together, or am I going to do something about it by myself for something over here, or am I going to get tired of you keep venting about it and I need to do something different, like not listen or be around to listen anymore? You know what I mean? So it's really the powerful thing and the reason why I was so excited about this, I'll call it a challenge, and I appreciate your challenge. I know you didn't really like physically say I'm challenging you to a duel, but it's a great exercise, because when I hear those things, like, and you said that you wholeheartedly believe there was a difference, I was like, okay, great, because I know that they're the same. So this is going to be a great conversation to bring people together, because once, like you said, once we stop wasting all this time and energy on complaining versus venting, and we can actually do something about it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's the next
And
step after that
thank you
people are missing.
for being willing to have this conversation with me,
Oh,
because
yeah.
really what I am now realizing is what I said before. I noticed that it's the same behavior, but venting was acceptable and complaining wasn't.
And that's the
And
gaslighting factor.
that's the gaslighting factor. And that's the key to this. That's what was out that I didn't realize.
Mhm.
Because one was acceptable. So I'm like, wait, venting is good.
Mhm.
But you're like, it's the same thing. So I'm like, what are we saying here? The behavior is okay, whether you
Mhm.
call it complaining or venting.
And it's
It,
needed.
it's needed. Whatever you want to call it, we're not going to get anywhere without it. So
Exactly.
I'm so thrilled. I think this is so exciting. You just helped me so much. Thank you.
Thank you. You helped me
We
as
have some
well.
clarity. We have some clarity here of moving beyond this way and
So,
finding better ways to
so,
communicate.
oh, excuse me, go ahead.
No, that's it.
So now I like your next thought about, because the kibashing and the get, like, because we've talked about the gaslighting, we've talked about the conformity. So let's get together offline and feel like, because I do feel like now, I feel like we've covered a lot of that, right? But I feel like now we've discovered a step that wasn't spoken about. I don't think we really focused on. We talked about maybe examples when we were talking about gaslighting. We talked about this, that, and the other, about that would fall under this first step of being that open expressing or venting or complaining. It's all the same thing, right? So we talked about step one, which is to admit there's a problem, basically, right? Because they say denial is the first stage, right? So we got to get past denial and admit there's a problem. So whether you're complaining about it or venting, some people are going to be in that stage a little longer. So it's not fair to call them complaining, because they still trying to get into first gear, at the stoplight a little longer. You know what I mean? but then they're getting out of denial and they're getting into realizing that there is a problem. And now we know that down here on the receiver's end, there's gaslighting, conformity, everything. So let's maybe get together offline and figure out what should be the next step. And then maybe we can talk about that, because that's going to be from this person. A lot of what we talked about is from outside. The gaslighting comes from outside. The conformity pressure comes from outside. The devil's in the details is external, but also internal, right? So let's get together and see what the next topic is going to be. How you feel about that?
I love that. And I'm thrilled, because I think we got to resolve. I think we both are after the same thing. We were willing to have the conversation and work through our different points of views to understand, what the real problem was.
Mm-hmm.
We figured that out, and it just came back to the gaslighting and the titles again.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Always
Yes,
a perfect day.
always a perfect day. Yes, this is great. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Trish. I'm Pasha Paroh Y Net 7. Trish, you got any closing remarks?
Thank you for watching, and know that what we're after is understanding these things, working through them so we can move forward with new ways and improving how we communicate. That's my humble 2 cents on that.
Hey, thank you so much, Trish. It's always an honor for you to be a part of the healing of the planet with me, the atmosphere and the consciousness as a whole. And thank you as well for watching and being a part of it. Let us know in the comments below what you think the next video should be about. What did you feel about, this conversation? Did it help you get clarity on venting and complaining? Because we also showcased how once you start talking about whining, okay, that's something else. Once you start talking about this over here, okay, that's something else. That's insanity. So stay in line, right? It'll save you a lot of time and energy, and we'll get a lot much more done. like to know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm Pasha Paroh. This is Wide at 7. That's Trish McCabe. Check out her channel, Conversations from the School of Hard Knocks on YouTube. Key in Trish McCabe to find it. And it's always the perfect day. Thank you for tuning.
Thank you.